Before we start, please make sure to subscribe to our channel to get more videos like this one. For more related video, especially a preparation like this one, check the description box below. Now let's start.
Duty. Do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. Duty was a straightforward concept at our house. Bottom line, it meant doing what I was supposed to do without being told to do it. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old, and I lived for the next 10 years with my mother in Florida. Then, at 15, I decided to live with my dad in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I knew I'd be in college in a few years, and I wanted to get to know my dad better before I left. In high school, I played football, baseball, tennis, and ran track, but basketball was my true love. My schedule was crammed, but my dad, a successful real estate developer, insisted I find a job on top of everything else. He wanted me to learn what it takes to earn money myself. He had the right idea. So I got a job at McDonald's and worked after school and on weekends. Over the summer, I worked on a ranch. The ranch hands got a good laugh when on my first day of work, I showed up wearing a baseball cap, tank top, and sweatpants. They were all dressed in stiff jeans, boots, long-sleeve shirts, and rawhide gloves. I realized why after about 8 hours of baling hay. When I limped home that first day, blood was running down my arms and thighs. For those of you that have never come in contact with real, cut hay, you have to handle it carefully. It is very sharp. The farmhands all got a kick out of the city kid working on a ranch, but as the summer progressed, I actually got proficient enough to brand cattle. Branding was a team effort. One cowboy sat on the ground and hooked a boot heel behind the calf's back leg to hold its hind quarters, and the other placed a knee on its upper shoulder and held its front leg to further immobilize it. Another ranch hand would brand the calf, give it a shot of medicine to prevent infection, and quickly trim its horns before releasing it back into the herd. I learned a lot about ranching. It definitely toughened me up, strengthened me for the football season, and taught me respect for ranchers and farmers and the work they do. Actually, between McDonald's and the ranch, I covered a cow's life from birthing to burgers, and I learned what it meant to wake up at 4 a.m. to drive out to the ranch to bale hay all day under the blazing sun, to empty the trash at McDonald's, and to fit work in with sports and academics. Through it all, I didn't want to let anyone down. And as General Robert E. Lee says, "Duty, then, is the sublimest word in the English language. You should do your duty in all things. You can never do more. You should never wish to do less." Besides impressing upon me the importance of making my own money, my dad, a self-made man, had definite opinions on higher education. He believed it was the student, not the school, who determined the quality of one's education. I agreed, but I also knew that it was important to create networks for success. No one can do it entirely on his or her own. I knew I could get a great education at the University of Wyoming, but I wanted to be on a fast track with students at Stanford or Harvard. For my junior year, I set up an elaborate chart listing all the pros and cons of various schools. No school even came close to what the U.S. Military Academy had to offer. So at 16, I started networking to make my way through the highly competitive application process. One day, then Congressman Dick Cheney was speaking at the crosstown rival high school. I sat through his speech and afterwards introduced myself, telling him that I was interested in attending a military academy. We're all familiar with the saying, "It's not what you know, it's who you know." Meeting Dick Cheney certainly helped me. He, of course, later served as Secretary of Defense while I was an Army officer, and now he's Vice President of the United States. I'm a huge believer in networks, in connecting people and helping them out. Mr. Cheney kindly did that for me, providing my official nomination to West Point, the final step of a grueling application process. I received an early acceptance to West Point during my senior year of high school. Now that I was in, I figured I'd better go see exactly what I was getting myself into. My dad and I flew out to New York, and I spent the night with a cadet in his barracks while my dad stayed in Hotel Thayer on the Army post. And yes, West Point is on an Army post, not a college campus. The cadet escorted me to a lunch formation, and I attended several classes. It was a March day on the Hudson River, and the weather was freezing cold, gloomy, and gray. But the sheer history and stature of the campus made a tremendous impression on me. The West Point program, which focused on intellectual, physical, military, and moral ethical training, was very impressive. The weight of history that hung over the almost 200-year-old Army post was awesome. I was barely 18 years old, and it was amazing to think that I could receive the same training as Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, Douglas MacArthur, Dwight D. Eisenhower, George S. Patton. The famous names went on and on. It was a popular saying at West Point, "Much of the history we teach was made by people we taught." What was most inspiring was that I knew and could see that West Point didn't just provide a great liberal education, it provided real leadership training. Still, I was facing a huge decision. West Point was hardly your typical run-of-the-mill college experience. Many of my friends from Florida and Wyoming were heading off to schools like Stanford with outstanding academic reputations, or schools where sports and parties were the primary attraction. I, on the other hand, was committing myself to 4 years of the most rigorous discipline and training with little freedom, and on top of that, a 5-year stint as a United States Army officer after graduation. I was facing duty for the next 9 years, more than half my life up to that point. And as Johann Wolfgang von Goethe would say, "How can you come to know yourself? Never by thinking, always by doing. Try to do your duty, and you'll know right away what you amount to." Going to West Point was a decision I have never regretted, not even for a moment. West Point was absolutely the right place for me. The official West Point mission is to educate, train, and inspire the Corps of Cadets so that each graduate is a commissioned leader of character, committed to the values of duty, honor, country, and to prepare them for a career of professional excellence and service to the nation as an officer in the United States Army. I give them credit for doing an excellent job. A key component of duty is accountability. That was instilled immediately and forcibly at West Point. As plebes, or freshmen, my classmates and I were immediately saddled with all kinds of daunting responsibilities, none of them optional. Life was a blur of classes, drill, sports, studying, and the many other tasks that were assigned to us. We had to do them all, like them or not, it was our duty. And as Joseph F. Newton says, "A duty dodged is like a debt unpaid. It is only deferred, and we must come back and settle the account at last." Like many of my classmates, I did not miss a single class, not once in 4 years, for the simple reason that I wasn't allowed to. Roll was taken at the start of every class. There was no such thing as not completing an assignment or failing to turn in homework. This was not at all like regular college where a student might say, "Oh, I blew off the paper," or "I let that assignment slide." Skipping assignments and taking the F was not even within the realm of possibility. It just did not happen. We actually attended classes and learned the material. Then, of course, there was our military training, which included everything from tactical training to parade or drill exercises. For much of the year, parades were held for the public who came by to see what West Point is all about. We were told that parades were an excellent way to build discipline and attention to detail. Preparing our uniforms, being inspected, marching with precision, and standing in formation for hours in the heat, cold, or rain. Endless hours of standing still in hot wool uniforms, or, later in the year, walking in circles in the rain with icy winds blowing off the river, sure wasn't fun. It was a leadership challenge simply motivating everyone to do it. Roll call was taken at every drill formation, and just like class, there was no such thing as being unaccounted for. At West Point, as in the Army, there were no missing persons. If someone didn't answer roll call, another cadet was sent to find him or her and escort them to class or formation. There was literally no place to hide. A cadet might be really sick and legitimately need to see the doctor, but he or she would be tracked down and his or her whereabouts noted. We were training to be soldiers, the most serious job in the world, and accountability for every person was critical. You can't go to war and succeed without your full unit. In the bigger picture, the whole idea behind going to West Point is doing your duty for your country. General MacArthur gave a very famous speech to the cadets at West Point in 1962 when he accepted the Thayer Award for his distinguished service. He was in his 80s at the time, and his stirring message served as his farewell address. General MacArthur spoke eloquently about those three hallowed words, duty, honor, country, in one of the most inspirational speeches ever. As cadets, we were trained and prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for our country, to put ourselves in harm's way, and to remember that when we gave or were given orders, they could involve life and death. The United States Army is a volunteer organization. Yes, there have been drafts to shore up the ranks in the past, but since my cadet days, it's been an all-volunteer force. And it's the strongest, greatest, and most effective fighting force in the world. Men and women who volunteer for the Army learn duty as a first principle. They center their lives on it. While West Point offers an excellent education, and the Army offers great training, programs, and a chance to see the world, the cadets and soldiers who step up and volunteer do it for duty's sake. When you think of duty, you immediately think of the military, and men like Roger Staubach. Staubach was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in 1964, but completed his military service, including a tour in Vietnam, before starting his pro career. He didn't join the Cowboys until 1969, as a 27-year-old rookie. As a Heisman Trophy winner, Roger Staubach could have argued that he could do a better job representing the Navy as a football star, rather than serving in Vietnam. But he didn't even consider it. He went to do his duty. An old Italian proverb says, "By learning to obey, you will know how to command." Roger told me, "When I was in high school, I went to visit the Naval Academy and really liked it. The mixture of discipline, solid education, and outstanding sports program just felt right to me. I was eligible for the pro football draft after my junior year because I had spent a year at junior college before entering the Naval Academy. But I knew that I still had 5 years of service ahead. I never even had a thought of leaving the academy early. 4 years when you're a young kid seems like an eternity, but I knew exactly what the deal was. 4 years of school and a 4-year Navy obligation. I certainly had the desire and the ability to play professional football, but I really enjoyed the camaraderie at the Naval Academy and in the military. I absolutely wanted to do my duty. When I graduated, I wasn't sure I would ever play football again, and I was all right with that. If I hadn't played pro football, there's a good chance I would have stayed in the Navy as a career." An equally compelling example of someone with an incredible sense of duty is the late Pat Tillman. He was a man who had it all: Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year at Arizona State University, a fantastic player for the Arizona Cardinals. He was living at a level that maybe 0.1% of the entire population is capable of reaching. But after 9/11, when the call went out that the U.S. needed Special Forces troops, he volunteered to do his duty. He turned down a $3 million plus contract with the Cardinals to enlist in the Army, undergo Ranger training, and ship out to Afghanistan. Pat Tillman fought for a cause he believed was just and paid the ultimate price. No one ever said that doing your duty is easy or comes without great cost. Doing your duty means taking orders, sometimes from people you disagree with. You might not agree with your company's direction or your boss's latest decision, but doing your duty as an employee or team member means no bellyaching. Get with your team, get with the program, and do your part to accomplish the mission. Your day-to-day responsibilities and obligations at work, all the tasks you are charged with in whatever role you fill at your organization. None of these should be things that require constant monitoring or lots of discussion. Just do it. Duty goes beyond executing orders. It means assessing and doing what needs to be done. It means asking, what's the overall mission for my job and my employee's job in this company? This thinking is straight from the military. Military personnel take to heart the idea of, how do I make sure that the overall mission is accomplished? The military and almost every business operate in team environments. A good commander in the military wants to hear input from all his soldiers because the ramification of low morale and poor performance are death. It is much easier to fall in line and do your duty in the military because you've been trained that way. You take a direct order and follow what your officer says, period. It's second nature, something that has been ingrained from the moment you signed up. It makes for efficiency and effectiveness. Just before a decision is made and an order given, an officer reflects on training, doctrine, strategy, circumstances, resources, and personnel. No military decision is ever made willy-nilly. Duty does not mean blind obedience. A soldier can actually be prosecuted for following an unlawful order, as in the movie A Few Good Men. In the private sector, the same principle applies. You might have to execute orders you don't like, but there's no excuse for dishonesty, immorality, or illegality. Behaving honorably is your most important duty to yourself and your organization. You can't plead ignorance. You can't say, I was just doing what my boss told me to do. As the boss, you can't whine, I was just following the plan my CFO or accountant laid out. You must follow your internal moral compass. As a leader, especially a CEO or a board member, you have a duty to protect shareholders' interests. And as an employee, it might sometimes become your unfortunate duty to speak up when you identify underhanded or shady behavior. As Peter Drucker said, management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right things. Pete Dawkins is currently vice chairman of the Citigroup Private Bank, providing sophisticated wealth management services to clients worldwide. An outstanding cadet and athlete at West Point and a distinguished military leader who retired as a brigadier general, he has been a student of leadership for many years. He told me, one of the tyrannies of large organizations is that it often doesn't matter how good the overall organization is. If your immediate boss is a loser, Your world is at best frustrating and potentially a dead end. On another note, he observed that in formal organizations, it's a tough call to tell the boss something he doesn't want to hear. There's a lot of talk about speaking up, yet most people know when you tell the boss that what he is proposing is wrong, there's a good chance you won't change his mind. Furthermore, you may get fired, or, more likely, find years later that doing so disadvantages you down the line. The fact is, it takes courage to speak up, and it's risky. It's a very personal choice. It really comes down to, how do we want to live our lives? As a leader, your obligations are greater and your standards must be even higher. Let's take a very small, simple example. Say you work at a company with its main office in a large suburban office park. A bunch of employees are returning from their lunch break and see some trash scattered on the lawn of corporate headquarters. Most of them won't even give it a second glance. They barely even see it, and they certainly don't feel any need to pick it up. They just aren't invested enough, or feel a large enough sense of duty to the company. But if someone who owns shares in the company walks by, a board member, the CEO, the president, you want employees who will pick up the trash, who will do their duty in the big picture and down to the smallest detail. And someone who served in the military? Not only will they pick up the trash, they'll make sure no one litters to boot. And as Harry S. Truman said, the buck stops here. At the time I applied for The Apprentice, I had been out of the Army for 10 years and had a number of entrepreneurial ventures behind me. When I was told I had been chosen for the show, I was a businessman living in San Diego. I had pressing obligations to 2 businesses. I was president of Core Objects, a software development company, where over 3 years the role had evolved from part-time consultant to a half-time employee responsible for corporate development to full-time president. At the same time, I was consumed with growing Motor Pride, a website for car enthusiasts, the first business I had conceived and built from the ground up with my friend and business partner, John Kraft. I talked to my business partners about my new commitment. During the filming of the show, I would be totally out of pocket. No calling in every day, checking messages, or following up with the clients. And of course, in the event I won, I would be completely removed from the businesses for at least 1 year and maybe forever. Because of the strong team we had developed over 3 years at Core Objects, I wasn't uncomfortable about leaving. One of the greatest accomplishments during my time there was building such a great team. I had every confidence in them and did not worry about going missing for an extended period. Motor Pride, however, was in a completely different position. It would be a great deal of slack for my partner, John Kraft, to pick up. Luckily, we had grown to the point where it was the right time to bring on a general manager. So we hired Klaus Holzapfel, a great marketer with a special interest in cars. We had the business model down, and now we had the manager to make it work. In retrospect, we had to wonder why we didn't do this sooner. Note to self and all of you entrepreneurs out there. Hire experts with deep domain knowledge to manage your businesses as soon as possible. In the Army, that's why we have warrant officers. I felt I could leave both Core Objects and Motor Pride because we had built them the right way with the right people. It is a hallmark of a good organization that it inspires people to grow and learn. Many of these people will eventually want to leave for new challenges. A good organization understands and even welcomes this. In the military, assignments are being changed all the time, and units learn to adapt. The military knows that duty includes doing the right thing for its people and developing their skills, even if it means moving that individual to another unit. In the private sector, a perfect example is McKinsey Consulting. When an employee says he wants to pursue other opportunities, McKinsey's response is, "Great, you'll continue to be paid for as long as you need to be, within reason. Do you need an office for a while? How about a secretary to help?" McKinsey understands that an ambitious person going to another business might become a client someday, or rejoin the company with new skills and experience. That whole defensive short-term perspective of, "You can't leave," or "pack up your stuff and get out right now," is simply bad management, bad business, and bad leadership. The military actually makes a point of cross-training people, assigning them to ports around the country and around the world, of sending people to school. Officers understand that it's not a matter of loss to unit, but of ultimate gain for the Army. Likewise, at Core Objects, we make a point of congratulating departing valued employees, letting them know how much we'd like them back and how much we'd love to do business with their new company. When I won my spot on The Apprentice, this same congratulatory response was given to me, and I was grateful for it. We made sure my responsibilities were covered, we thought of how I could leverage my opportunity for the benefit of our companies, and we talked about what sort of useful exposure our companies could get. When I became Donald Trump's apprentice, I recognized a new duty: to represent my former companies and colleagues as best as I could, and that included my brothers, literally in the case of 3 of my 4 younger brothers and sisters in the military. Did serving in the military help me win the apprentice? I know it helped me, and instilling in me a devotion to duty was a big part of it. The Apprentice and Duty. My final task on The Apprentice, the ultimate challenge that would decide the winner, was to put on a charity polo event. I had no control over my team because they had already been fired. They had nothing to work for but their own self-respect, and I certainly counted on that in the selection process. I picked Elizabeth first because she was a strong marketer, and John second because he was a real workhorse and someone I liked. And finally I looked at Raj. He had made quite an impression on the show with his wardrobe and wandering eye. He was sitting there in his trademark bow tie. I said, "We're going to a polo field? Raj, you're perfect." I focused on appealing to my team members' duty. They had nothing to lose. I certainly understood that. So I told them right at the start, "I want to win this, and I'd appreciate your support. I know you want to do well coming back in the final episode to show the world that you shouldn't have been fired." All 3 of them really came through. The polo match was a great success. But in boardroom discussions with Donald, Carolyn, and George, I got an earful for not having Mr. Trump's seat cleaned at the polo field. I said, "That was my fault, Mr. Trump. Everyone was kicking butt, doing everything I asked, and that was one of the details I planned to take care of. I accept full responsibility. It was not appropriate. I should have taken more care to have the VIP area all set up, and I didn't do it." And that was that. Taking responsibility ended the conversation. This wasn't a gimmick or a trick. Ultimately, it was my fault. I didn't oversee somebody to see that the seat was cleaned. There was no reason to point the finger at Elizabeth or Raj or John and say they should have taken care of it. Elizabeth was doing a fantastic job setting up a great dinner and live auction with entertainment by Tony Bennett after the polo game. John and Raj were doing their parts too. Another problem had come up with the sign for one of our sponsors. It was blown over by the wind and got broken. This fell into Elizabeth's area, and she had informed me that the sign wasn't up, but I made the decision from a priority standpoint that we needed to finish sorting out the dinner arrangements. Now in the boardroom, Carolyn and George kept saying, "The sponsor is really upset. Nothing was set up. Wasn't that Elizabeth's area?" Almost trying to get me to point the finger and say, yes, she should have done that. What I said was, it was my fault. She notified me that the sign wasn't fixed. She had maxed out her resources of what she was capable of doing, and it was back in my queue. I didn't reassign it or take care of it myself, so it was my fault. Again, because I took responsibility, that discussion ended. In the military, I was taught not to take all the credit and assign all the blame. Duty means taking responsibility for everything. Whatever went wrong was my fault, because I needed to manage the team better so they could finish their tasks. Or I could do them myself. I certainly wasn't going to say, "Oh, we had a great event, a big success. I did it all. And those 2 little things that got screwed up, that was Elizabeth." My team had done a great job for me, and I wanted to make that clear to the Trump people and to everyone watching the show. My team had done its best. It was my job as leader to take responsibility for making sure everything was done right, down to the very last detail. Jim Kimsey on duty. Jim Kimsey is a West Point graduate, member of the Ranger Hall of Fame, founder of AOL, and noted philanthropist. During our meeting, he reminisced about his days as a cadet. "I attended West Point in the late 50s, early 60s, a time when the academy was kind of idealized. The long gray line. There was a television program called West Point, airing each week back then, and every kid in America wanted to go there. Those guys were famous. Quite frankly, I figured at the time if I went to West Point, I'd probably do very well with the ladies. I didn't count on them never letting us out. I was not what could be called a great cadet. It was a tremendously restrictive environment, particularly back in those days, and I can't say I liked that too much. In retrospect, I must credit West Point with a great deal, up to and including keeping me out of jail. I remember the very first day I arrived for the beginning of Beast Barracks, which was quite an in-your-face shock. I was told there were only 3 answers to every question: yes, sir, no, sir, and no excuse, sir. It took me a long time to fully appreciate and internalize what that really meant. Internalizing and living by the idea that there was no excuse was a very valuable lesson I've carried throughout my life. It means that you bear responsibility for all of your own actions, and as a leader, you bear responsibility for the welfare of those in your organization and the outcome of its missions. If you lead men into combat and some of your men get killed, that's going to be you personally explaining to a mother why their kid died. There's no excuse for that. And if you're CEO of a large organization and have to lay off 3,000 people, there's no excuse for that either. I believe that once you internalize the idea that you bear full responsibility for your actions, it pushes you to think ahead far enough to ensure that whatever you undertake will have a successful outcome. Because the bottom line is that there is no excuse for not having a successful outcome. People who deal with me realize that explanations are one thing, but I try to lead my life in a no-excuses way and expect that others will follow my example. Which is why I like to hire employees who attended West Point or are military veterans of any branch. I know that among their many other valuable skills, they have most certainly learned the lesson of accountability and will bring it to bear for the good of my organization. Take command, duty. You know what to do 99% of the time. When an employee asks me a question, I look him in the eye and ask, what's the right thing to do? Almost every time he can make the decision on his own. So stop waiting for someone to tell you what to do. Be active and do the right thing. This applies to both your work and your personal life. Just do it.